The red warning lights flashed across the bridge of the UES Defiance as Commander Sarah Chun watched the tactical display with growing dread. 47 human ships faced down over 300 Vorthic biovessels in the Kepler's Edge system. The alien ships looked like giant insects made of bone and metal, their hulls pulsing with sickly green light. "Ma'am, the Altarian fleet is requesting permission to fall back to Defensive Position 7, reported Lieutenant Torres from the communications station. Sarah frowned. Defensive Position 7 was halfway across the system. That would leave the humans exposed to the full force of the Vorthek attack. Denied. Tell Admiral Kethver we need his cruisers on the front line. The battle had been raging for 6 hours. The Vorthek swarm had come out of nowhere, pouring through a dimensional rift like angry hornets from a broken nest. This was supposed to be a safe system, far behind the front lines of the war. But the enemy had found a way to strike deep into Coalition space. Sarah's fleet was the closest military force when the attack began. 50 ships carrying the best soldiers humanity had to offer. The 3rd Human Expeditionary Fleet had been returning from a successful mission against the Vorthak supply base when the distress calls started coming in. "Commander Chun, this is Admiral Kethver." The Altarian's voice crackled through the speakers. His species looked like tall, blue-skinned humans with 4 arms and silver eyes. "My ships have taken heavy damage. We must withdraw to regroup." Sarah gritted her teeth. The Altarians had barely engaged the enemy. Their ships were some of the most advanced in the galaxy, equipped with energy shields that could stop almost anything the Vorthek threw at them. But they seemed more interested in staying safe than fighting. "Admiral, we need every ship we can get. There are 2 million civilians on the planets in this system. If we fall back now, they all die." "That is regrettable, but my orders are clear. The Altarian fleet will not risk unnecessary losses." The communication ended. Sarah watched in disbelief as 30 Altarian cruisers began moving away from the battle line. Their sleek silver ships disappeared behind the cover of an asteroid field. "Ma'am, incoming transmission from the Centauri battle group," Torres called. Out. Admiral Vexra appeared on the main screen. The Centauri looked like giant crabs that walked upright, their voices speaking through mechanical translators. "Commander Chun, we have received new orders from High Command. We are to withdraw immediately." "What orders? From who?" "That information is classified. We apologize, but we must comply. Good luck, humans." The 30 Centauri battleships turned and jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind only the fading light of their engines. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Half their allied support had just abandoned them. "Commander, the vegan support fleet is also pulling back," reported her tactical officer, Major Williams. His voice was tight with controlled anger. Sarah watched as the insect-like vegan ships retreated to the edge of the system. In less than 20 minutes, her coalition force had been reduced to just the human ships, 47 vessels against an enemy fleet that outnumbered them 7-1. "Get me a direct line to Admiral Morrison at Earth Command." Sarah ordered. The face of Admiral Morrison appeared on her personal screen. The old man looked tired, his gray hair disheveled. Behind him, Sarah could see the chaos of Earth's military command center. "Sarah, I've been waiting for your call," Morrison said quietly. "Sir, our allies have abandoned us. We need immediate reinforcement or permission to withdraw." Morrison was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "There are no reinforcements coming, Commander. And you don't have permission to withdraw." "Sir, I don't understand." "The Coalition Council has made their decision. Human forces are to hold the line at all costs. Your sacrifice will give our allies time to prepare better defenses." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. "Sacrifice? Sir, we have 50,000 people on these ships, soldiers, crew, support staff. They're not just numbers on a report. I know what they are, Commander. I know each and every one of them signed up to serve humanity and protect innocent lives. But the decision has been made above my level. The other species have convinced the Council that human forces are the most expendable." Sarah felt rage building in her chest. "Most expendable? We've been fighting this war longer than anyone. We've lost more ships, more people. We've never run from a fight. And that's exactly why they chose us, Morrison said bitterly. Because they know we won't run, even when we should. The ship shook as a vorthic energy blast struck their shields. Red damage indicators flashed across Sarah's console. Around them, the battle was getting worse. 3 human destroyers had already been lost, their crews dying in the cold vacuum of space. "Sir, what are my orders?" Morrison's face was grim. "Fight as long as you can, make them pay for every inch, and Sarah ... I'm sorry, for what it's worth I argued against this, we all did. But the vote was unanimous among the alien members." The communication ended, leaving Sarah staring at a blank screen. Around her, the bridge crew worked frantically to keep their ship in the fight. They didn't know yet that they had been abandoned by everyone they trusted. "Ma'am, Captain Rodriguez on the Houston is requesting orders," Torres reported. Sarah looked at the tactical display. The Vortex ships were closing in like a tightening. "No, sir, people were fighting bravely, but they were outnumbered and outgunned." The alien bioships seemed to repair themselves as fast as the humans could damage them. She opened a fleet-wide channel. "All ships, this is Commander Chun. I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to stay calm. Our allied fleets have withdrawn from the battle. We are on our own." Silence filled the communication channel for several seconds. Then Captain Rodriguez's voice came through, steady despite the circumstances. "Orders, Commander?" Sarah looked around the bridge at her. "Crew, these were good people, trained soldiers who had volunteered to fight for humanity and protect innocent lives. They deserved better than to be thrown away by politicians who saw them as numbers on a casualty report." "We do what we came here to do," she said firmly. "We protect those civilians. We make the enemy pay for every ship they want to take from us, and we remember who stood with us and who didn't." "Copy that, Commander. Houston will fight to the last shell." One by one, the other ship captains reported in. The destroyers Yamato and Wellington, the cruisers New York and Mumbai, the assault carriers Normandy and Stalingrad, all of them ready to fight, even knowing they had been abandoned. Sarah watched the vortex flow in around them. The alien bioships moved like living things, their bone-white hulls covered in weapon ports that glowed with deadly energy. This was going to be a slaughter, but if they wanted to kill humans, they were going to learn that humans didn't die easily. All ships, attack pattern Delta. Target the largest bioships first. Make every shot count. The human fleet charged forward into the overwhelming enemy force. Behind them, their former allies watched from a safe distance. They would claim later that the humans died heroically, buying precious time with their noble sacrifice. But Sarah Chun and her people had a different plan. They were going to survive this betrayal, and someday they were going to make sure the galaxy remembered what happened at Kepler's Edge. 3 years later, Commander Sarah Chun crouched behind the twisted wreckage of a Vorthic bioship, her rifle trained on the enemy patrol moving through the ruins. Her face bore new scars, and her once pristine uniform had been replaced by salvaged armor pieces from a dozen different species. The woman who had commanded a fleet was now a ghost haunting the abandoned sectors of space. The Vorthic patrol consisted of 4 creatures that looked like walking nightmares. Each stood 8 feet tall with multiple arms ending in razor-sharp claws. Their insect-like heads turned constantly, searching for any sign of the humans who had been terrorizing their supply lines for months. Sarah touched her throat twice, sending a silent signal to her team. Sergeant Martinez emerged from the shadows behind the patrol while Lieutenant Kim flanked them from the right. These weren't the same fresh-faced soldiers who had sailed into Kepler's Edge 3 years ago. They were survivors, hardened by betrayal and shaped by endless fighting. The attack was swift and silent. 3 years of guerrilla warfare had taught them to kill without making noise. The Vorthic patrol died before they could send a warning signal. Sarah and her team stripped the bodies of weapons and equipment, taking everything useful before melting back into the ruins. "Command, this is Ghost Team 7, Sarah whispered into her communicator. "Supply route Alpha is clear. Moving to secondary objective." The voice that answered belonged to Captain Rodriguez, who now coordinated operations from their hidden base. "Copy that, Sarah. Intelligence team found something you need to see. Return to base when possible." Sarah led her team through the maze of destroyed buildings that had once been a Vorthic military outpost. They moved like shadows, using routes they had memorized over months of raids. Every survivor had learned to think like their enemy, to predict where the Vorthak would search, and how to avoid their patrols. The human base was hidden inside the wreckage of their old flagship, the UES Defiance. The massive ship had crashed on this dead world during the final battle at Kepler's Edge, but enough of it remained intact to provide shelter. Over 3 years, the survivors had turned it into a fortress that the Vorthak couldn't find. Sarah walked through corridors lined with salvaged equipment and improvised weapons. The walls were covered with maps showing Vorthak positions and supply routes. Photos of the dead hung in places of honor, reminding everyone why they fought. Of the 50,000 humans who had entered the Kepler's Edge system, only 12,000 had survived. In the main briefing room, Dr. Marcus Webb waited with a grim expression. The former ship's doctor had become their intelligence chief, using his knowledge of alien biology to understand enemy communications. His hands shook slightly as he held a datapad, and Sarah noticed the dark circles under his eyes. "You found something," Sarah said. It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded and activated the main display. A series of intercepted communications appeared on the screen, translated from various alien languages. "We broke into a Vorthic communication relay yesterday. What we found changes everything." Sarah read the first message and felt her blood turn cold. It was dated 18 months ago and came from the Galactic Defense Coalition High Command. The message was simple: operation complete. Vorthak threat eliminated. All Coalition forces return to normal duties. "The war is over?" Sarah asked quietly. "Has been for a year and a half," Marcus confirmed. "The Coalition defeated the main Vorthak fleet shortly after Kepler's Edge. They're calling it the greatest military victory in galactic history." Sarah scrolled through more messages. Reports of victory celebrations, peace treaties, and reconstruction efforts. The galaxy was rebuilding, trade was resuming, and life was returning to normal. All while 12,000 humans fought for survival in the ruins of their betrayal. "There's more," Marcus said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. He switched to another set of documents. "These are official Coalition records. Look at the entry for the 3rd Human Expeditionary Fleet." Sarah found the record and read it aloud. "The 3rd Human Expeditionary Fleet was lost with all hands during the heroic defense of Kepler's Edge. Their noble sacrifice allowed Coalition forces to regroup and ultimately achieve victory over the Vorthak threat. A monument to their memory has been erected on Earth." The room fell silent. Sarah stared at the screen, processing what she was reading. According to official records, they were all dead. Heroes who had died for the greater good. The galaxy thought they had made the ultimate sacrifice and moved on. "They erased us," she said finally. "It gets worse," Marcus continued. "I found records of the Coalition Council meetings from before Kepler's Edge. They planned the whole thing. The alien members voted unanimously to use human forces as a distraction while they prepared their real attack. They knew we would all die, and they decided we were acceptable losses." Sarah felt rage building in her chest, the same anger that had kept her alive for 3 years. But now it had a focus, a target for all the pain and betrayal they had endured. Lieutenant Torres entered the briefing room, still wearing his communications gear. "Commander, we just intercepted a broadcast from Earth. You need to hear this." The main screen switched to show a human news reporter standing in front of a massive stone monument. The monument bore the names of every person who had served in the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet, including Sarah's own name carved in black granite. "Today marks the 3rd anniversary of the Battle of Kepler's Edge," the reporter was saying. "Once again, citizens across Earth gather to honor the 50,000 brave souls who gave their lives for freedom." President Martinez will lay a wreath at the memorial later today, and a moment of silence will be observed across all human colonies. Sarah watched her own memorial service in stunned silence. Her parents were there, older now and dressed in black. Her sister held flowers that she placed at the base of the monument. They were mourning her death while she stood alive and breathing in a ruined spaceship. "Turn it off," she said quietly. The screen went dark, but the damage was done. Sarah could see the same realization in the faces around her. They weren't just forgotten or abandoned. They had been deliberately erased from history, their sacrifice rewritten to serve the Coalition's narrative. Captain Rodriguez spoke first. "What are our orders, Commander?" Sarah looked around the room at the faces of her surviving crew. These people had followed her through 3 years of hell, fighting an enemy that the rest of the galaxy no longer even remembered. They had earned the right to go home, to rejoin their families and try to rebuild their lives, but home didn't want them anymore. According to official records, they didn't exist. "We have 2 choices," Sarah said slowly. "We can try to go back to Earth and prove we're alive. We can fight the bureaucracy and the cover-up, hoping someone will listen to the truth." "Or," Rodriguez asked, Sarah's voice turned cold, "or we can make them remember us. We can show the galaxy what happens when you leave humans to die." Marcus leaned forward. "The Coalition thinks we're dead. That gives us an advantage they can't predict or prepare for." "Exactly," Sarah nodded. "They betrayed us, erased us, and moved on with their lives. But we're still here. And we've learned things in the past 3 years that they can't imagine." She gestured to the maps on the walls, showing Vorthek technology and tactics they had mastered through desperation and survival. "We know how to fight like the enemy. We know how to move unseen, how to strike without warning. Most importantly, we know exactly who betrayed us and why." Lieutenant Kim spoke up from the back of the room. "You're talking about revenge." "I'm talking about justice," Sarah corrected. "The Coalition made their choice at Kepler's Edge. They decided human lives were expendable. They chose to sacrifice US for their own benefit. Now they need to learn what that choice really costs." She stood and walked to the tactical display, pointing to the star map that showed Coalition space. "They think they won the war. They think they're safe in their victory. But they left one enemy alive, and that enemy knows all their secrets." Sarah turned back to her people, seeing the same cold determination in their eyes that she felt in her heart. "We're not going home as refugees begging for recognition. We're going back as ghosts returning to collect a debt. The galaxy forgot about us once. They won't make that mistake again." The room erupted in grim smiles and nods of agreement. Outside, the wind howled through the ruins of their crashed ship, but inside something new was being born. The abandoned soldiers of the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet were transforming into something the galaxy had never seen before. They were becoming the Forsaken. The Altarian research station orbited a gas giant in the Vega system, its silver hull gleaming in the light of twin suns. For the past 6 months, it had been conducting experiments with captured Vorthek biotechnology, trying to find new weapons and defenses. The scientists inside believed they were safe, protected by advanced shields and a full squadron of patrol ships. They were wrong. Sarah Chun floated in the darkness of space, her modified suit making her invisible to sensors. Around her, 11 other members of her strike team waited for the signal. They had been planning this attack for weeks, studying patrol patterns and security protocols. The Altarians had gotten sloppy in peacetime, confident that no enemy could reach them in the heart of Coalition space. "Ghost leader to all units," Sarah whispered into her communicator. "Target confirmed. Beginning approach." Her team moved like shadows through the void, using small thruster packs to navigate between the station's sensor blind spots. They had learned these techniques from captured Vorthek infiltrators, studying how the enemy moved unseen through defended space. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah, that she was using alien tactics against the species that had abandoned humanity. Lieutenant Torres led the second team toward the station's communication array while Sergeant Martinez took his group to the power core. Dr. Webb had provided detailed blueprints of Altarian technology, knowledge gained from 3 years of salvaging crashed Coalition ships. They knew exactly where to strike for maximum effect. Sarah's group reached the main laboratory section without being detected. She attached a shaped charge to the outer hull, just above where Webb had calculated the primary research lab would be located. The device was a human creation, built from salvaged Vorthak explosives and refined through months of trial and error. "All teams in position," Rodriguez reported through the secure channel. "Execute," Sarah ordered. The explosions came simultaneously from 3 points on the station. Lights flickered as the power grid failed, and atmosphere began venting from multiple hull breaches. Emergency sirens wailed as Altarian scientists ran for escape pods, their forearms flailing in panic. Sarah and her team entered through the breach she had created. Moving quickly through corridors filled with floating debris, they wore full environmental suits, prepared for the vacuum they had created. The Altarians, caught by surprise, struggled with emergency oxygen masks and had no time to mount organized resistance. In the main laboratory, Sarah found what they had come for. Rows of contained Vorthak specimens floated in preservation tanks, along with detailed research notes and experimental data. But more importantly, she found the communication logs that showed which other Coalition species were involved in similar research. "Package secured," she reported, "beginning extraction." But extraction wasn't the real purpose of this mission. As her team prepared to leave, Sarah activated a device that Webb had spent months perfecting. It looked like a standard emergency beacon, but it contained something far more dangerous. Webb had learned to weaponize Vorthak biotechnology during their years of survival. This particular creation was a modified virus that would target Altarian immune systems, causing temporary but severe illness, not fatal, but debilitating enough to send a message. More importantly, it would spread to every Altarian who entered the station for the next several weeks. Ghost leader to all teams. Package delivered. Time to go. They escaped the same way they had entered, slipping away into the darkness before the Altarian response fleet could arrive. Behind them, the research station burned, its secrets scattered into space. But the real damage wouldn't be discovered for days. When Altarian medical teams began falling ill with a mysterious disease that their doctors couldn't identify or treat, 2 weeks later, Sarah stood in the abandoned cargo bay of a derelict freighter, watching Coalition news feeds on a salvaged display. The Altarian incident was the lead story across the galaxy, but the reporters had no idea who was responsible. "Terrorist attack leaves dozens ill," the anchor was saying. "Coalition intelligence believes this may be the work of Vorthak survivors, using biological weapons against civilian targets. The Altarian government has increased security at all research facilities and is calling for enhanced military patrols in border regions." Sarah smiled grimly. "Let them think it was the Vorthak." The enemy they understood was less dangerous than the enemy they had forgotten existed, Captain. Rodriguez joined her at the display, carrying a datapad with their next target list. "The Centauri Trade Depot at Volf 359 is lightly defended. We could hit their shipping records and financial databases." "Not yet," Sarah said. "We need to let them think about the Altarian attack first. Fear is more effective when people have time to imagine what might happen next." She turned to face the rest of her command team. Over the past 8 months, they had struck 15 targets across Coalition space. Supply convoys, research stations, communication relays, and military outposts. Each attack was carefully planned to cause maximum disruption with minimal loss of life. They weren't murderers, despite what the Coalition media claimed. They were soldiers delivering a message. Dr. Webb entered the cargo bay, his face pale but determined. The former ship's doctor had become their most valuable asset, using his knowledge of alien biology to create weapons that struck fear into species that thought themselves safe. His latest project involved a computer virus that could target vegan neural interfaces, causing temporary paralysis in their insect-like nervous systems. "The samples from the Altarian station are yielding interesting results," Webb reported. "They were much further along in their Vorthak research than we expected. Some of their experiments were clearly designed for military applications." "Sarah, nodded. What kind of military applications? Biological weapons, specifically weapons designed to target human DNA. The cargo bay fell silent. Sarah felt a cold fury building in her chest. The Altarians hadn't just abandoned humanity at Kepler's edge. They had been preparing to eliminate humans entirely, using Vorthic biotechnology to create species-specific weapons. How far along were they? Rodriguez asked quietly. Prototype stage, Webb answered. But the research notes indicate they were planning to share their findings with other coalition members. The Centauri and vegans both have similar programs running. Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had hoped that the coalition's betrayal was simply cold political calculation, a decision made in the heat of war. But this evidence suggested something far worse. The alien species hadn't just written off humanity as expendable. They had been planning humanity's extinction. Change of plans, she said, opening her eyes. We're accelerating the timeline. She moved to the tactical display and began highlighting targets across coalition space. The Centauri Financial Center at Alpha Centauri. The Vegan Communication Hub at Procyon. The Altarian Military Academy at Vega Prime. We hit them all simultaneously. That's a lot of targets, Torres pointed out. We don't have enough people for that many simultaneous strikes. Then we recruit more people, Sarah replied. There are others out there who have reasons to hate the coalition. Species that were conquered or enslaved, criminals who were discarded, soldiers who were betrayed. We find them and give them a chance to strike back. She turned to face her assembled officers. The coalition thinks they're safe because they won the war. They think their betrayal of humanity was just the price of victory. But they made one. Crucial mistake. What's that? Martinez asked. They left witnesses alive. And now those witnesses are going to tell the galaxy exactly what kind of creatures they really are. Over the next month, Sarah's network began to expand. They made contact with displaced Orion pirates who had been driven from their territory by coalition expansion. They found Tau Ceti rebels who had never accepted their planet's forced integration into coalition space. Most importantly, they discovered other human survivors scattered across the galaxy, people who had been abandoned or forgotten by their own government, the original 12,000. Survivors became the core of something larger and more dangerous. They called themselves the Forsaken, and their symbol began appearing in the darkest corners of coalition space. A broken star surrounded by 12 points, representing the survivors of Kepler's Edge. The coalition intelligence services had no idea what they were dealing with. Their analysts assumed the Forsaken were either Vorthic survivors or a new alien threat from outside known space. They couldn't conceive that humans could pose such a sophisticated challenge to galactic security, but Sarah and her people were no longer the same humans who had sailed into Kepler's Edge 3 years earlier. They had been forged in the crucible of betrayal and abandonment, shaped by years of fighting an enemy that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. They had learned to think like predators, to strike from the shadows and disappear before their enemies could respond. More importantly, they had learned that the galaxy's so-called peacekeepers were not the noble defenders they claimed to be. They were opportunists and cowards, who would sacrifice anyone weaker than themselves to protect their own interests. The coalition was about to learn what happened when you betrayed humanity and left them to die. They were about to discover that some debts could only be paid in blood. The Coalition Council chamber on New Harmony Station buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 12 different species gathered for an emergency session. Admiral Kethver of the Altarians paced back and forth on his forearms, his silver eyes darting between the other delegates. The past 6 months had been a nightmare of coordinated attacks that had shaken the very foundation of coalition unity. 17 major facilities destroyed. Admiral Vextra clicked through his mechanical translator. The Centauri's crab-like shell showed stress patterns that his species displayed when deeply worried. Our financial networks have been compromised 3 times. Trade between our worlds has dropped by 40% because merchants are afraid to travel. Ambassador Zeekth of the vegans chittered anxiously, her insect-like head turning to address each speaker. My government is demanding answers. How can these terrorists strike anywhere they want while our combined fleets cannot find even one of their ships? Kethver stopped pacing and faced the assembly. Intelligence suggests we are dealing with surviving Vorthek forces. Their biotechnology would explain how they can attack our facilities without being detected. Impossible, interrupted General Mortek of the Rigel Defense Force. We eliminated all Vorthek strongholds. Our victory was complete. Then explain this, Dextra said, activating the chamber's main display. A holographic image appeared showing a symbol that had been found at every attack site. A broken star surrounded by 12 points etched into metal or burned into computer systems. This mark appears after every strike. Ours and archaeologists have never seen anything like it in Vorthek culture. Deep in space aboard a captured Coalition stealth ship, Sarah Chun watched the council session through hacked security feeds. Her command center was a mixture of human ingenuity and alien technology, with displays showing Coalition fleet movements, civilian shipping schedules, and communication intercepts. The Forsaken had grown from 12,000 survivors to over 60,000 active members scattered across 50 star systems. They still don't understand what they're dealing with, Captain Rodriguez said, reviewing intelligence reports from their network of spies and sympathizers. They keep blaming the Vorthak because they can't imagine humans being capable of this level of coordination. Sarah nodded, her attention focused on a different display showing the results of Dr. Webb's latest intelligence breakthrough. 3 months of data collection had revealed the full scope of the Coalition's anti-human research programs. Every major species had been developing weapons specifically designed to target human biology, using Vorthek technology as a foundation. It's time, she said quietly. The past year had been spent building their network and gathering evidence. Now, they had enough proof to show the galaxy exactly what the Coalition really was. But more importantly, they had grown strong enough to survive the Coalition's response. Begin Phase 3, Sarah ordered. Across Coalition space, hidden transmitters activated simultaneously. The Forsaken had spent months infiltrating communication networks, planting devices in relay stations, and hijacking civilian broadcasting systems. Within minutes, every major news channel, government communication network, and public information system in Coalition space was carrying the same signal. Sarah's face appeared on screens across thousands of worlds. She wore the uniform of a Coalition naval commander, the same rank insignia she had earned before Kepler's Edge. Behind her stood the other survivors of the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet, men and women who were supposed to be dead. Citizens of the galaxy, Sarah began, her voice calm and measured. My name is Commander Sarah Chun of the 3rd Human Expeditionary Fleet, according to your government records. I died 3 years ago at the Battle of Kepler's Edge, along with 50,000 other human soldiers. The Coalition Council chamber erupted in chaos as the transmission continued. Kethver's silver eyes went wide with recognition. He remembered the human commander who had refused to retreat, who had demanded that the alien fleets stand and fight. We are the Forsaken? Sarah continued. We are the humans your leaders left to die because they decided we were expendable. We survived because humans don't die as easily as your politicians hoped. The transmission switched to show recordings from the original battle, captured by human ship sensors as Coalition fleets abandoned their positions. Admiral Kethver's own voice could be heard ordering the Altarian retreat, followed by similar commands from Centauri and vegan commanders. For 3 years, we fought for survival in territory controlled by your enemies, Sarah said as the footage showed the aftermath of Kepler's Edge, burning human ships, rescue pods floating in space, the desperate final hours of soldiers who had been betrayed by their allies. We learned that your Coalition Council voted unanimously to sacrifice human forces as a distraction. We discovered that you erased us from history to hide your betrayal. Ambassador Zeek clicked frantically at her communication device, trying to override the broadcast. But the Forsaken had learned from the best hackers in the galaxy, including several Coalition citizens, who had joined their cause after learning the truth about their governments. The transmission switched again. this time showing the secret research facilities that Webb's teams had infiltrated. Vorthak specimens in containment tanks, research notes detailing biological weapons designed to target human DNA, and correspondence between coalition scientists discussing the human problem. But we also learned something else, Sarah said, her voice growing cold. Your leaders didn't just abandon us. They were planning to eliminate humanity entirely. Every major coalition species has been developing weapons to commit genocide against our people. The evidence was overwhelming. Classified documents showed project names like Species Reduction Protocol and Biological Solution Implementation. Video recordings captured coalition scientists discussing how to make human extinction look like a natural plague. The galaxy watched in horror as the true face of their peaceful coalition was revealed. The attacks you have experienced over the past year were not random terrorism, Sarah continued. They were surgical strikes designed to gather evidence and expose your crimes. We could have killed thousands, but we chose to show restraint. That restraint ends now. In the Coalition Council chamber, emergency alarms began sounding. Security reports flooded in from across Coalition space. Military bases were under attack, government buildings were being evacuated, and civilian populations were demanding answers from their leaders. Sir, a communications officer reported to Admiral Kethver, we're receiving surrender demands from 17 different star systems. The Forsaken have cells embedded in our major population centers. Kethver stared at the transmission in disbelief. The human commander he remembered from Kepler's Edge had been an idealistic soldier fighting for peace and justice. The woman on the screen was something else entirely, forged by betrayal into a weapon unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. You had your chance to coexist peacefully, Sarah said, addressing the council directly as if she could see their faces. You chose betrayal and genocide instead. Now you face the consequences of that choice. The transmission ended, but its effects rippled across the galaxy within hours. On Altair Prime, massive protests erupted as citizens demanded their government explain the human genocide research. Centauri trade unions went on strike, refusing to support a government that planned mass murder. Vegan hive colonies began questioning their queen's participation in coalition war crimes, but the coalition's response was swift and predictable. Rather than admit their crimes, they chose to double down on their lies. Emergency session now in order, Kethver announced. The terrorist organization calling itself the Forsaken has declared war on civilized space. We must respond with overwhelming force. Agreed, Vexra clicked. This human infestation must be eliminated before it spreads further. Within hours, the Coalition had issued new directives. Any human found in Coalition space was to be detained immediately. Human colonies were placed under military occupation. Trade with Earth was suspended indefinitely. The Coalition was preparing to finish what they had started at Kepler's Edge, but Sarah had expected this response. In fact, she had counted on it. All units, this is Ghost Leader, she broadcast to her scattered forces. The Coalition has just declared war on humanity. They have given us everything we need to justify what comes next. The Forsaken had spent a year building their network and gathering evidence. They had shown restraint and tried to expose the truth through peaceful means. But the Coalition had chosen to respond with the same betrayal and violence that had started this conflict. Sarah looked at the tactical display showing Coalition fleet movements. They were mobilizing everything they had, preparing to crush the human threat once and for all. They thought they were dealing with a terrorist organization that could be eliminated through superior firepower. They were about to learn how wrong they were. All forces, prepare for the final phase, Sarah ordered. It's time to show them what happens when you try to exterminate humanity. The war was about to begin. The massive Coalition fleet approached New Harmony Station with the confidence of predators hunting wounded prey. Admiral Kethver commanded over 800 ships from across the galaxy, the largest military force assembled since the Vorthak War. Altarian cruisers, Centauri battleships, vegan assault carriers, and vessels from a dozen other species filled the space around the Coalition capital. Long-range sensors show no sign of enemy forces, reported his tactical officer. The terrorist fleet appears to have retreated to the outer system. Kethver allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The human terrorist leader had made a fatal mistake by revealing herself. Now, the coalition knew exactly who they were fighting, and they had responded with overwhelming force. By tomorrow, the Forsaken would be nothing but scattered debris floating. In space, signal all ships to maintain formation, he ordered. We will crush this human infestation in one decisive battle. But 40 million kilometers away, hidden behind the gas giant Titan's thick atmosphere, Sarah Chung watched the coalition fleet through sensors they couldn't detect. Her command ship was one of 50 vessels that made up the visible Forsaken fleet, all of them modifications of captured coalition technology. They looked like a ragtag collection of pirates and rebels, exactly what the coalition expected to find. They took the bait, Captain Rodriguez reported from his position at the tactical station. The entire coalition military is converging on our position. Sarah nodded, her expression calm despite the odds they faced. 800 ships against 50 seemed like suicide, but the coalition had made the same mistake they always made. They thought they understood what they were fighting. Doctor, Webb status on the special packages? Webb's voice crackled through the communication system from his position aboard a cloaked ship deep in coalition space. All devices are in position and ready for activation. The coalition's own communication networks will be their downfall. 4. The past year, while the coalition had focused on the visible Forsaken attacks, Webb and his teams had been infiltrating every major population center in coalition space. Not with soldiers or weapons, but with something far more dangerous. The truth. Ghost squadrons, report status, Sarah ordered. One by one, voices reported in from across the galaxy. Not from military vessels, but from coalition civilians who had joined the Forsaken cause after learning about their government's crimes. Teachers, workers, merchants, and even some military personnel who couldn't stomach the planned genocide of humanity. The coalition had expected to fight a conventional war against a human fleet. Instead, they were about to face something unprecedented. Their own people turning against them. All units, this is Ghost Leader, Sarah broadcast on multiple frequencies, ensuring that every ship in the coalition fleet could hear her words. Admiral Kethver, you remember me from Kepler's Edge. You were the first to abandon us to die. On the bridge of his flagship, Kethver's silver eyes burned with fury. How dare you address the coalition fleet directly? You are nothing but terrorists and criminals. We are the soldiers you betrayed, Sarah replied calmly. We are the witnesses to your crimes. And today we are your judgment. The coalition fleet began its attack run, weapons charging and fighters launching from carrier bays. Kethver felt confident that superior numbers and firepower would end this quickly. The human ships looked primitive compared to advanced coalition technology, but as the first energy blasts reached the Forsaken fleet, something impossible happened. The human ships didn't just survive the attack, they seemed to absorb it. Unknown to the coalition, the Forsaken had spent 3 years studying Vorthak defensive technology, learning how to turn energy attacks into power for their own systems. Impossible? Vextra clicked from his position aboard a Centauri battleship. Our weapons had no effect. All ships, concentrate fire, Kethver ordered. Overwhelm their defenses. But Sarah had already moved to the next phase of her plan. Dr. Webb, activate the network. Across coalition space, hidden transmitters began broadcasting simultaneously. But this time, they weren't targeting government communication systems. They were reaching directly into civilian networks, personal communication devices, and entertainment systems in billions of homes. The broadcasts showed footage from the secret research facilities, recordings of coalition leaders discussing human genocide, and testimonies from coalition scientists who had developed the biological weapons. But most importantly, they showed what was happening right now in the battle around New Harmony. Citizens of the galaxy, Sarah's voice reached every inhabited world in coalition space. Watch as your leaders attempt to complete the genocide they began at Kepler's Edge. The coalition fleet continued its attack, but now billions of civilians were watching every moment. They saw coalition ships firing on vessels that were clearly trying to avoid combat, human ships that were defending themselves rather than attacking on Altair Prime. Massive crowds gathered in public squares to watch the broadcasts on Centauri. World's workers abandoned their posts to witness their government's final crime. Across the galaxy, the Coalition's own people began to understand what their leaders truly were. "Sir," a communications officer reported to Kethver, "we're receiving massive civilian communication traffic. The populations are demanding we stop the attack." "Ignore them," Kethver snarled. "Continue firing." But Sarah had one more surprise. "Waiting. Ghost squadrons, you are clear to engage." Suddenly, ships within the Coalition fleet itself began targeting their own allies. Coalition vessels that had been secretly captured and modified by Forsaken infiltrators turned their weapons on the ships around them. The perfectly organized Coalition formation dissolved into chaos as commanders couldn't tell friend from enemy. "This is Captain Morrison of the CNS Pacifica?" came a voice over the Coalition command frequency. Morrison was a human officer who had survived the purges by hiding his identity. "I am taking my ship out of this formation. I will not participate in genocide." Other voices followed. Coalition officers of various species, who had learned the truth about the human research programs and refused to continue serving governments that planned mass murder. The Coalition fleet began to fracture from within as ships defected or simply refused to fight. "Traitors," Kethver raged. "You are all traitors to the Coalition." "No," Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. "We are the Coalition. The real coalition that your leaders betrayed when they chose genocide over peace." The battle had become something unprecedented in galactic history. Not a fight between two military forces, but a civil war within the Coalition itself as the truth spread across their communication networks. On Coalition worlds, governments began falling as populations demanded answers. The Altarian Council dissolved when protesters stormed their capital. Centauri trade unions took control of major industrial centers. Vegan hive queens found themselves isolated as their workers refused to follow orders. "Admiral Kethver, Sarah." BROADCS directly to his ship. "You have a choice. Surrender now and face trial for your crimes, or continue this futile battle and watch your coalition destroy itself." Kethver looked around his bridge at officers who were no longer following his orders. Half his fleet had either defected or stopped fighting entirely. The civilian populations were in open revolt, and more ships were joining the Forsaken every minute. "Never," he snarled. "The Coalition will not bow to human terrorists." "Then you've chosen your fate," Sarah said quietly. The final phase began. As Forsaken ships that had been hiding throughout the system decloaked around the Coalition fleet. Not just 50 ships, but over 300 vessels crewed by Coalition defectors, former prisoners and species that had been oppressed by Coalition expansion, but the real victory had already been won. Across the galaxy, the Coalition government was collapsing as their own people turned against them. The truth about Kepler's Edge, about the planned human genocide, about the lies and betrayals that had built their empire, spread like wildfire. Through every communication network, Kethver's flagship exploded in a burst of light and debris, taking with it the last symbol of Coalition authority. Around the battlefield, the remaining loyal ships began surrendering or fleeing into hyperspace. Sarah stood in the ruins of the Coalition Council chamber aboard New Harmony Station, looking out at the stars through a shattered viewport. The station had been evacuated, its government fled to hide in the Outer Rim. The coalition that had ruled the galaxy for decades was finished. Captain Rodriguez joined her at the window. "What happens now?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the long road that had brought them here. From the betrayal at Kepler's Edge to this moment of victory, humanity had been transformed by abandonment and forged by survival into something the galaxy had never seen before. "Now the galaxy rebuilds," she said finally. "But this time they'll remember what happens when you try to exterminate humanity. They'll remember that we came back from the dead to collect our debt. The war was over. The coalition had fallen, and across the galaxy, a new age was beginning, one where humanity would never again be considered expendable. The Forsaken had kept their promise. They had returned for blood, and they had collected it in full.